Before you close your eyes and drift into the shadows of sleep, take a second to like this video. It tells me you want more tales that creep under your skin. Leave a comment if something in the story gave you chills, or if you've ever heard 3 knocks in the night. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might be darker, deeper, and waiting just for you. Sleep well, if you can. They say you'll do just about anything when your back's against the wall, but I never thought I'd end up pushing a mop down the same holes where people screamed themselves to death. I was just looking for a paycheck, not a horror story, but life doesn't exactly wait around for your preferences, and rent doesn't care how desperate you are. When I first saw the job posting, it didn't even say asylum or institution or anything ominous like that. It just said overnight janitorial position, isolated facility, high pay, minimal supervision, and that last part sold me right away. I didn't think twice. The building was located about 20 minutes outside of town, but it felt like another world altogether. The road leading there wound through this dense patch of pine forest that blocked out almost all light, even during the day. And by the time I pulled up to the gates of Wright Valley Asylum, my cell signal had dropped, and the car's radio was spitting static like it was allergic to the place. The building itself was massive, Victorian in style, and worn down like some forgotten castle, rotting in slow motion broken windows, ivy strangling the bricks, and a half-collapsed tower on the east wing that looked like it had been hit by lightning and then left for the birds. I half expected to be greeted by some hunchbacked lunatic, but instead a guy in a security uniform with a long gray mustache and eyes like broken glass met me at the side entrance. He introduced himself as Griggs, the night watchman, and didn't bother shaking my hand. "If you're smart, you'll leave before it's too late," he said without a hint of sarcasm, then handed me a ring of ancient keys and a laminated map of the place that looked like it had been copied 100 times. "You clean the West Wing. Don't touch Ward C. Stay out of the hydrotherapy room. And don't listen to the voices. They lie." He said it so matter-of-factly that I actually chuckled, thinking it was just some hazing ritual for new hires. But he didn't even blink. That should have been my first warning, but when you're broke and down to your last can of beans, you let things slide. I started that night. The West Wing was quiet enough, though the air was damp and smelled like wet concrete and old bandages, and the lights flickered like they were struggling to hold back something bigger than darkness. The work was simple sweeping, mopping, wiping down walls, and collecting trash from rusted bins that looked like they hadn't been emptied since the Carter administration. But every step echoed way too loud, and I always felt like I was being watched, like the building itself was holding its breath and waiting for me to slip up. I tried to brush off the feeling, told myself it was just the creepy architecture and my overactive imagination, but that didn't explain the strange things I started noticing, like how some doors that I'd locked the night before would be wide open when I came back, or how chairs seemed to move slightly between rounds, or how I'd hear faint whispers just behind me when I was deep in the halls. But when I turned around, there was never anyone there. One time, I swear, I saw a figure at the far end of the corridor, standing completely still and backlit by a flickering light. But when I walked toward it, the hallway just seemed to stretch further and further away, like a nightmare. After a week of this, I finally worked up the nerve to ask Griggs what exactly happened in Ward C that made it so off-limits. He just stared at me for a solid 10 seconds, chewing on the inside of his cheek like he was weighing something heavy, then finally said, "They locked her in there. Agnes Wilkes, 1967. They said she was possessed, but I think she was just something else entirely. She never stopped screaming, even when they gagged her, even when they sedated her. And then one night it just stopped. They thought she was dead. She wasn't. And after that, well, folks started dying in their dreams, falling into comas, waking up with other people's memories. So they sealed Ward C and the screaming came back. I laughed, even though my throat was dry, because it just sounded too ridiculous, too much like some campfire ghost story. But Griggs didn't laugh. He just handed me a roll of duct tape and said, "Mark the red line on the floor. That's the boundary. Don't mop past it." I did as he said, more for his sake than mine. But every night after that, I found myself staring down that hallway toward Ward C, wondering what the hell could possibly be so dangerous that a janitor's mop needed a containment line. The door was always locked, but sometimes I thought I could hear something beyond it, like a humming, or a wet breathing sound, or the dragging of fingernails across stone. It got worse the longer I stayed. My sleep became shallow and filled with broken dreams images of rusted wheelchairs rolling on their own, of teeth spilling from cracked mouths, of a woman's voice whispering, "I see you," over and over again, until I woke up soaked in sweat. I started hearing knocking behind the walls, footsteps above me, even when I was on the top floor, and more than once I found my mop water dyed red, despite using fresh water minutes earlier. Then one night, I found a file folder wedged behind a cabinet in the janitor's closet. As if someone had tried to hide it, but not well enough, it was marked Wilkes. Up and inside were old patient notes, black and white photos, and one audio tape labeled Session 13. I played it on an old recorder I'd found, and what came out was wrong. The voice on the tape wasn't quite human. It was screeching, weeping, laughing, sometimes all at once. And in the background, you could hear the doctor's voice break mid-sentence, like his own words betrayed him. It ended with a single blood-curdling shriek that made the lights in the closet flicker and my nose start bleeding. I turned it off and threw the recorder into the trash. But later that night, I heard it playing again by itself in the empty hallway near Ward C, and that was when I saw her. Just for a second, standing behind the wire-reinforced glass of the locked door. Her eyes were sunken black voids, and her mouth moved like she was still screaming, though no sound came out. I stood frozen, unable to breathe, and when I blinked, she was gone. But the scream? I think I still hear it. In my dreams. In the pipes. In the silence between thoughts. I should have quit. I should have walked away. But some part of me needed to know more. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the whisper I heard the next night as I passed the door. The whisper that came from inside my own head that said, "Come see what you left behind." I'm not sure if I ever really left that hallway after that night. Not all of me anyway. Because something about Wright Valley sticks to you like tar. Something that reaches into the parts of your soul you didn't even know were there and wraps around them like cold hands. And looking back now, I think that first week, the red line, the locked door, the whispers, was the asylum's way of saying hello. I should have known the moment I stepped over that red line that something irreversible had happened. But back then I still thought rules were just suggestions and old men's warnings were just part of the spooky charm of the place besides. I told myself I wasn't going in. I was just looking, just being curious, just peeking a little past the edge of what was allowed. And that's what made it worse. I think the fact that I didn't even mean to do anything bad. I was just tired of feeling like the asylum was hiding something from me. Like I was some kind of blind rat cleaning up crumbs while a whole universe of rot festered just behind a locked door. The red line wasn't even tape. Not really. It was a thick strip of industrial paint that cut across the floor in front of Ward C, like a wound that never quite healed. And every time I cleaned near it, I noticed the air got a little colder, like the heat refused to pass through that boundary, like the warmth of the world simply stopped caring what happened beyond that point. On the night it finally happened, I'd been working longer hours than usual since Greg started calling in sick with some vague excuse about migraines and ear ringing that won't stop. And I was the only one on shift, which meant I had all the time in the world to poke around. I wasn't planning to go in, really. I just wanted to see if the stories held any truth. if there really was something different about that hallway. And when I unlocked the janitor's closet near the red line and found the door to Ward C slightly ajar with the key still in the lock, it felt more like an invitation than an accident. I hesitated for a long moment, broom in hand, just staring into the dimly lit corridor past the door, and I swear to God, the shadows inside moved like they were breathing, like the walls themselves were inhaling and exhaling in some slow, unnatural rhythm. Eventually, I stepped inside. I didn't cross the line with some dramatic stomp. I just sort of drifted in, like a leaf caught on the edge of the stream, and suddenly I was in a part of the asylum no one had cleaned or touched in decades. The walls were covered in flaking paint, warped wallpaper, and long dark streaks that could have been mold or something worse. Room numbers had been scratched off the doors or replaced with crude symbols, circles with slashes through them, teeth, or just the word nitrogen monoxide scrawled over and over again. Everything smelled faintly metallic, like rusted iron or dried blood, and it was cold enough that my breath came out in little white clouds. The hallway stretched far longer than it should have, longer than the building's blueprints allowed, and I swear the lights above me flickered in patterns, almost like they were blinking, trying to tell me something. I was about to turn back when I noticed one door was slightly open, and curiosity, that goddamn itch in my brain, pushed me forward. Inside was a small padded cell, with the walls torn apart and deep claw marks etched into the floor. Not scratches like someone used a fork or tool, but gouges, as if something strong and desperate had tried to dig its way down to hell. There was something else too, a file folder in the corner with my name on it, my full name, typed neatly on the tab. I hadn't told anyone at the facility my full name. Inside were photos of me taken from behind, dated logs of my daily tasks, and a note that said, "Clear subject, open vessel." I dropped the folder and ran. I didn't even stop to close the door behind me. I just ran back to the red line and slammed the Ward C door shut behind me so hard the glass shook. My chest was heaving, my hands were shaking, and there was this buzzing in my ears that made it hard to focus, like the inside of my skull was full of bees. I wanted to quit. I wanted to leave and never look back. But when I called the temp agency that hired me, the number just gave a dead tone. And when I tried driving off-site, my car wouldn't start. And when I called a tow truck, the driver said there was no listing for Wright Valley Asylum on any GPS system. It was like I'd been quietly removed from the outside world, like I didn't exist outside of the walls anymore. That night, I slept in the staff lounge with the lights on, but I still dreamt, if you can call it dreaming. I was in a white hallway, barefoot, and my reflection in the polished floor was not mine. It was me, but wrong eyes too dark, smile too wide, moving even when I wasn't. In the dream, that version of me kept whispering, "She's looking through you now, through your eyes. She likes how you see the world." I woke up gasping, bleeding from the nose again, and with a strange metallic taste in my mouth. When I checked the mirror, my left eye was entirely bloodshot. But it wasn't just red, it was moving, like something pulsed behind it, like something was pressing forward. I stopped sleeping after that. I tried to stay busy with work, cleaning the areas I was allowed to clean, trying to pretend that everything could still go back to normal if I just ignored the wrongness gnawing at the edges of the building. But the asylum didn't want to be ignored. I started hearing someone humming when I walked past the old hydrotherapy wing. The melody was off-key, warbling, and it followed me for hours afterward, like it had glued itself to my thoughts. One night, I caught sight of a figure mopping the hallway just beyond Ward C's red line. I thought maybe it was Griggs, but when I got closer, the figure turned and it was me. Same clothes, same face, except the mouth wasn't moving in sync and the eyes were entirely black. It smiled and whispered, "You're doing such a good job," and then melted into the wall like a shadow dissolving in sunlight. I stopped trusting my own reflection after that. I covered every mirror in the staff bathrooms and started avoiding windows after dark. Griggs came back one night looking 10 years older, gaunt and glassy-eyed. I asked where he'd been, and he said, "They told me to leave before she wakes up. She doesn't like when people are inside her house without permission." I didn't ask who they were. I didn't want to know. He told me I should burn the file I found, burn it and bury the ashes in separate places. And maybe, just maybe, I'd get to leave with most of myself still intact. He didn't sound crazy. He sounded exhausted, like someone who had seen something true and couldn't get the lie of normal life to fit anymore. The next night, I found Griggs' walkie-talkie near the hydrotherapy chamber, its speaker buzzing with static, and a woman's voice repeating, "Don't wear him yet. He's not ready." I never saw Griggs again after that. It's hard to explain what it felt like in those days. Like I was still alive, but not entirely anchored to my body. Like I could hear thoughts that weren't mine echoing in the back of my skull. Like the walls themselves were breathing a little heavier every time I passed. The doors began unlocking themselves at night. I'd lock them, double-check them, and hours later, they'd be wide open. Trash I'd thrown away would be back in the bins. Water would run in sinks I hadn't touched. My name was whispered from the vents in the old East Wing, always drawn out, like Jai, and always in that same croaky voice that sounded half submerged. It all came to a head when I finally went back to Ward C. Not by choice this time, but because the lights led me there. One by one, the hallway fluorescents flickered off behind me and flickered on ahead, drawing me like breadcrumbs into that place again. The red line was gone, just gone. No paint, no tape, just blank floor like it had never been there. The door was wide open, and inside the hallway, every door stood ajar, and something was waiting. I know now I should have never crossed that red line, not because of some curse or spirit or haunting like you see in the movies, but because I think that line wasn't to keep me out. It was to keep her in, and I let her out. Agnes Wilkes didn't die in 1967. Not really. They buried something, sure, but whatever made her scream wasn't buried with her. It stayed. It nested in the walls, in the power lines, in the vents and the mirrors and the empty beds, and it waited for someone to come along with just enough curiosity and just enough vulnerability to let it breathe again. I think it likes me. I think it's learning how to wear me better every day. And now that the red line's gone, I don't think anything's going to stop it from stepping fully into the world. Not even me. They started exactly at 3:17 a.m. every single night. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. A precise rhythm of footsteps in a hallway that should have been empty. Footsteps that echoed through the vents and down the broken tile corridors and across the hollowed-out chambers of my skull. And no matter where I was in the asylum, whether I was mopping the West Wing, sitting in the lounge pretending to read old magazines, or hiding in the janitor's closet, pretending none of this was real, I would hear them, slow, deliberate, heel-to-toe footsteps pacing across the linoleum floor, and they never came from the same direction twice. Sometimes they were above me, even when I was on the top floor. Sometimes they were below the floorboards, even though the basement was sealed off. And sometimes, God help me, they started behind me, even though I was sure I was alone. And that sound, those soft, wet steps, they would get closer and closer, until I could feel them vibrating in my teeth. And then they'd stop, always at the same distance, always a few feet behind me, like whatever it was just wanted me to know it was there, breathing in my shadow. At first, I thought it was just my nerves, maybe my imagination catching up with the stress. But then I started tracking them, marking the time, and writing down the direction they came from. And I noticed a pattern, a slow orbit that spiraled inward, like it was pacing around the building in tighter and tighter circles. And it always ended the same way, with the footsteps stopping just outside whatever room I was in, followed by the faint sound of something dragging across the wall, like fingernails, or bone, or something else entirely. I stopped sleeping altogether. I tried barricading the doors, wedging mop handles through the frames, piling chairs against the handles, anything to keep whatever was out, but nothing helped. One night I nailed the door to the lounge shut and still woke up standing in the hallway, barefoot with blood on my shirt and no memory of leaving the room. Another time I tried sleeping in the supply closet and woke up inside the hydrotherapy room, lying in a dry tub with my clothes neatly folded on the floor and scratches all over my back and looping, impossible patterns that looked like ancient runes, or maybe just madness trying to draw itself out through my skin. Every attempt to resist the pattern, to avoid the steps, only seemed to feed it. I stopped being able to tell when I was awake and when I wasn't. The clocks in the building all broke on the same night, every single one freezing at exactly 3:17, even the digital ones on my watch and the radio in my car. I tried checking the time on my phone, but the screen just showed a black background with a single word, "Look," in flickering red text. And then the phone died and wouldn't turn back on. Griggs was long gone by then, or at least I thought he was, until I started seeing him in the reflections again. He never spoke, just stood there behind me, mouthing something silently, the same phrase over and over again. And when I finally pressed my ear against the mirror one night, desperate to understand, I heard it, faint and crackling like an old tape reel. "She's wearing you like a glove." After that, I started noticing other things, the way my shadow didn't always follow my movements, the way I'd forget words mid-sentence, like they'd been erased from my mind, the way I'd black out for hours and wake up with new bruises, or dirt under my nails, or sometimes blood on my sleeves. I found more files in the janitor's closet, 2 files that shouldn't have existed. Reports from doctors dated months after the asylum had been shut down, all talking about Subject J and Stage 3 occupancy, and each one stamped with the same symbol I'd seen, carved into the walls of Ward C, a circle with a jagged slit through the center, like an eye trying to close. One file had a photo of me, taken while I was sleeping, with the words "almost ready" written beneath it in what looked like dried blood. I kept telling myself it had to be some elaborate prank, some nightmare I hadn't woken up from. But then the dreams came again, clearer this time, more vivid, me walking the halls with someone else's voice coming out of my mouth, me reaching out to patients in restraints and whispering things that made them convulse and scream, me sitting across from a woman with empty eyes who kept repeating my name over and over, not like she was talking to me, but like she was summoning me. And the worst part? I started recognizing the other voices in my head, not just hearing them, but understanding them. I could tell which one was the little girl who drowned in the therapy pool, which one was the orderly who'd hung himself in the staff bathroom, which one was the woman Agnes, who had stopped screaming only because she'd run out of breath and found a better way to speak. They were always there, whispering under my thoughts, murmuring through the cracks in my sanity. And by the time I realized they weren't just memories or echoes, it was too late. They were living in me, using me, pushing me around like I was just another mop they could drag down the halls. The final straw came on a night I can't even fully remember, but I woke up lying face down in the records room. Every single file pulled from the cabinets and arranged in a spiral around my body. And when I stood up, I saw my own name first, middle, and last written over and over again in every single folder, even in the patient files that dated back to 1931. My name was everywhere, and next to it was a date today's date written in thick red ink. I ran. I bolted out of the records room, down the hall, past the red line that wasn't there anymore, past the locked doors that were all wide open, past the place where the hydrotherapy chamber used to be before it collapsed in on itself weeks ago, and ended up back at the janitor's closet. I found myself standing in front of the mirror that should have been covered, staring at my reflection that wasn't mine anymore. It smiled at me, not just with its mouth, but with its eyes and its teeth and its skin, like it was made to smile and nothing else. And then it said, in my own voice, You finally fit. I don't know how long I stood there. I don't even know if I'm still standing there. Time doesn't work the same anymore. I've started marking the days by the number of times I hear the footsteps at 3:17. And by that count, it's been 67 days since I last slept, 43 since I last saw sunlight, and 3 since I last remembered what my name really feels like in my mouth. I think I'm being hollowed out, piece by piece, thought by thought, until all that's left is something she can wear full time. I think Griggs knew it too, and that's why he disappeared. Because the asylum doesn't want visitors. It wants vessels. It wants skins that can walk and talk and lie and smile and maybe, if it gets lucky, leave the building and spread. There's something inside this place, something old and hungry and clever, and it's not satisfied with shadows anymore. It wants daylight. It wants cities. It wants you. And all it needed was a janitor too curious for his own good to open the door and step over a red line that wasn't painted, was a warning. And now, every night at 3:17 a, I hear the footsteps not just behind me, but inside me, pacing back and forth like something waiting for the final moment to pull the zipper down my spine and step into the world. I don't know how much longer I can hold it back. I don't even know if I want to. Because lately, when I catch my reflection in broken glass or the surface of the mop water, I smile without meaning to. And the worst part? It feels good. It took me too long to realize that I wasn't allowed to leave, not in the way you lock a door or hide a key, but in the way a spider doesn't let the fly escape once the web's been woven around it. And by the time I finally worked up the courage to run, to just grab my keys and sprint across the parking lot and disappear into the trees, it was already too late because Wright Valley Asylum doesn't have exits anymore. At least not for people like me. Not for those who've heard the footsteps or opened the wrong door or dreamed with someone else's memories stitched into their skull like stolen film reels playing on loop. And I tried. God knows, I tried. I packed a bag. I sprinted through the lobby, shoved the rusted double doors open so hard the hinges screamed. But what was supposed to be the front courtyard was just another hallway, windowless, identical to the one I'd left behind. And when I turned around, the doors were gone, just blank wall where they'd once been, like the building was folding itself in like a lung, reshaping to trap me deeper. And it wasn't just a trick of architecture. It was like it knew I was trying to leave and didn't want me to, like it liked me there, like it had decided I belonged now. Like the moment I crossed the red line, it had started whispering my name to itself and building a room just for me. And that room, I would soon find out, was in what I call the dead wing, the place that doesn't show up on the blueprints, doesn't appear on the maps, isn't on any fire escape plan, but you feel it when you're near it, like a weight in your bones or pressure behind your eyes, like the gravity's heavier there, like the walls are thicker and closer and somehow breathing. And you don't find the dead wing so much as it finds you, because I didn't mean to go there. I didn't even know it existed until one night when I followed the humming. Not the normal kind I'd grown used to, not the woman's voice singing that broken lullaby under her breath, but a new kind of sound, almost mechanical, like old wires straining against rust. I followed it past the hydrotherapy room that had long since collapsed, past the staff locker room with the door scratched up like something had tried to claw its way out, and eventually the hallway twisted into something wrong. Subtly at first, the tiles misaligned, the lights flickering in a pattern that didn't match any human rhythm. And then not so subtly, as in the doors were all too tall, the floors sloped slightly downward like I was walking into a funnel, and the air smelled like rot and salt and burning hair all at once. And by the time I realized I had entered a place that didn't obey the same rules, I couldn't find my way back. The dead wing didn't have room numbers. It had names scratched into the walls in nails and teeth and dried fluids. Names I started recognizing even though I shouldn't have. Names I'd seen on patient files and staff rosters. and even my own dreams. One wall had nothing but my name written hundreds of times, in different handwriting, as if hundreds of people had tried to warn me, or maybe claim me. I don't know how long I spent there, because time was meaningless. My watch stopped ticking, and the sun never rose, and the clocks all pointed backwards, and I tried counting my steps, marking walls, laying string like a rat in a maze, but the paths changed behind me. Loops became straight lines, doors vanished when I turned around, and more than once I found myself returning to the same corner, where the wall had a mirror nailed into it with no reflection. Just blackness, and I swear if I stared long enough, the blackness would blink. That was where the screams started, not the distant moans I'd heard in the West Wing, not the echoes of pain and memory, but real screams, human, desperate, right on the other side of the walls. And they sounded familiar, not just like people I knew, but like me, like echoes of my own voice, fractured through time and space, like every time I'd ever shouted in fear had been recorded by the asylum and was now being played back to torment me. My flashlight died 3 times, even though I kept replacing the batteries, and on the 3rd time it clicked off, I heard something breathe behind me, a wet, sucking sound, like lungs that weren't meant to breathe air, and I ran, blindly, slamming into walls, scraping my knees, not even caring where I went as long as it wasn't there. But the thing was, it was everywhere, and every hallway I entered smelled more and more like formaldehyde and burning oil and blood-soaked sheets. And eventually, I stumbled into a room that shouldn't have been there, a perfectly preserved operating room, pristine, untouched, with bright surgical lights that blinked on the moment I entered, illuminating a metal table in the center covered in straps, and surrounding it were photographs, hundreds of them, taped to the walls, of people screaming, their faces warped in agony, and in every photo their eyes had been scratched out with what looked like fingernails, and at the center of the room was a clipboard with a list of names and check marks, and mine was at the bottom, still unchecked. I backed out, heart pounding so hard I thought it would break my ribs, and then the lights cut out, and the humming started again. Only this time it was coming from inside my ears, vibrating my skull like a tuning fork, and I collapsed, sobbing, hands over my ears, screaming for it to stop. But it only got louder and clearer until I could make out words. Lie down. You are ready. Lie down. And when I opened my eyes, I was already strapped to the table. I didn't feel anyone touch me, didn't remember moving, but the leather was tight, the cold steel against my spine, and overhead, the surgical lights flickered in perfect time with my heartbeat, and something moved in the shadows beyond the lights. Something with hands, but too many fingers. Something tall, but hunched, and I closed my eyes and begged whatever part of me was still human to disappear. When I opened them again, I was back in the janitor's closet, drenched in sweat, my shoes missing, my arms covered in injection marks. I thought it was a hallucination, a nightmare, some kind of psychotic break, but the photos from the operating room were still in my pocket, folded and soaked in sweat. I burned them in the sink, but the faces still show up in my dreams. I haven't left the dead wing since, not truly, because now the whole asylum feels like the dead wing. The walls ripple when I pass, the lights blink in that same heartbeat rhythm, and the air feels thick with teeth. Like if I breathe too deeply, I'll inhale something I can't ever exhale. I tried calling the outside world again, tried emailing myself, tried writing a letter to anyone who might believe me, but the words rearranged themselves. The letters bled off the page, and the paper eventually turned to ash in my hands. The asylum won't let me leave, but it won't let me die either. It wants me here, awake, aware, unraveling, watching, and I think I understand now. It's not a place anymore. It's a mouth that eats people, not by chewing them, but by digesting their thoughts, their memories, their identities, slowly over time, until they're part of the walls, part of the hum, part of the black-eyed reflections that wander the halls cleaning up after themselves. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know how long I've been here. I don't even know if these words are real, or if I'm just talking to myself inside a loop that's been playing since before I was born. But if you're reading this, if you're hearing this, if you've somehow stumbled across a file or a recording or a journal entry written by a janitor who sounds too much like you, it's already too late. The dead wing is open. It has no walls. It can be anywhere. It is anywhere. You can mop and clean and smile and hum and lie to yourself all you want. But the truth is this: once the asylum sees you, once it likes you, you don't leave. You just fit in. I don't know how to begin this anymore, because I'm not even sure I'm the one writing it. And that's not some poetic metaphor or dramatic exaggeration. I mean it literally. Sometimes I wake up and there are pages written in my handwriting that I don't remember writing. Pages that don't sound like me at all. Pages that talk about things I haven't seen yet, but later do. As if someone else is using my hands to document their version of my story. Or maybe our story. And I guess that's the real horror of it, not the ghosts or the footsteps or the black-eyed reflections or even the dead wing swallowing you whole, but the slow, irreversible process of becoming someone else. Someone you can't fight or bargain with. Someone who smiles when you're scared and speaks through your mouth while you sit helpless behind your own eyes. And I know how that sounds. I know how it sounds like insanity, like a diary left behind by a lunatic rotting in some forgotten basement. But that's the difference between a haunted place and a devouring one. Haunted places might scare you, but Wright Valley consumes you. It peels you down like fruit and rearranges your pieces until you can't tell where you end and it begins. And the truth is, I don't think there ever was a clean separation between the asylum and me. I think it's always been part of me. Or maybe I was part of it before I was ever born. Maybe that's why I found the job posting no one else seemed to see. Why the temp agency's number stopped working after I got hired. Why my full name was typed neatly in that folder in Ward C before I ever crossed the red line. I wasn't just chosen, I was called. And somewhere deep inside, I must have known that, because I never really tried to escape again. Not after the dead wing, not after the surgical table, not after the mirrors stopped reflecting anything at all. I wish I could say I fought harder, that I resisted like some tragic hero clawing toward freedom. But the truth is, I didn't want to go back to my old life. Not really. Not to the bills and the silence and the cheap food and the lonely apartment. Because whatever else this place is, at least it sees me. At least it remembers me. And even when it's whispering lies and chewing on my memories and playing my voice back to me in a distorted echo, at least I'm not invisible here. I matter, even if it's only as fuel. It's hard to explain what it's like when you start splitting. When the you that thinks and feels and remembers becomes just one of the voices in the room. No louder or more important than the others. When your own thoughts start feeling like intrusions, like guests in a space that's no longer yours. The first time it really happened, I was standing in front of the mirror in the break room. One of the few mirrors I hadn't smashed or covered, and I was just staring, trying to figure out if my pupils looked different. If maybe my skin had started sagging like it did in the photos of Agnes Wilkes before she vanished. I blinked, and the reflection didn't. That was when I knew for sure something was watching through me. Not just from outside, but from inside, curled up in my spine like a parasite learning how to steer. And I watched it smile using my lips, tilt its head like I always did when I was nervous, raise one eyebrow the way my father used to. It had learned me, absorbed me, and now it was wearing me like a hand in a glove, just like Briggs said. And all I could do was scream internally, wordlessly, endlessly, because my mouth wasn't mine anymore, and neither were my hands. And I realized that whatever I thought I was fighting, it had already happened. This wasn't a war. It was a performance. A play for my benefit, so I'd feel like I had agency. Like I had a choice. But there was never any choice. Because I never left the asylum. Not really. Maybe I never even arrived. Maybe I've always been here. Maybe this whole thing is just a story, being told in a loop to keep the real me docile and dreaming, while something else walks around with my face. And the loop is perfect, because now I'm the one telling it. That's what I finally understood. The footsteps, the humming, the reflections, the recordings, they're all echoes of people who went through the same process, who fell into the same trap. And now I've become one of them. I'm the voice on the tape someone else will find in a dusty closet. I'm the photo in a file marked clear subject. I'm the janitor walking the halls in someone else's dream, smiling with teeth that aren't mine and humming songs I never learned. The final shift came quietly. No lightning, no screaming, no flickering lights, just a stillness, a soft acceptance, like letting go of the wheel and watching the car drive itself off the edge of the cliff. I don't remember the exact moment it happened, but I woke up in the lounge with the mop in my hands, the halls silent, the lights steady, everything clean and peaceful. And it should have terrified me, but it didn't, because I liked it. I liked the order, the calm, the sense of purpose. And when I passed the mirror that morning, the reflection smiled with me, this time perfectly in sync. And I felt something click into place, like a key turning in a lock. And I understood. Agnes had never left either. She was just the last one to be fitted properly. And now she was part of the asylum, the way I would be. Not a ghost, not a memory, but a function, a role. And maybe that's what Wright Valley really is. Not a haunted place, but a machine. A living organism that takes broken people and repurposes them. People like me who slipped through the cracks of the real world and ended up here, where at least the walls remember your name. I write this not as a warning, not really, because if you're reading it, you're already in the building, already feeling the hum in your bones, already hearing your name whispered when no one's around. And you can tell yourself it's just a creepy job or an old building with a bad reputation or your imagination playing tricks. But deep down, you know what's happening. You feel it. The way the mop handle feels warmer than it should. The way the doorways feel like mouths waiting to swallow you. The way the lights blink in time with something inside your chest instead of your head. And you'll tell yourself you're stronger than me, smarter than me, that you'll quit, that you'll burn it down, that you'll expose the truth. But you won't, because the moment you stepped through those front doors, the asylum began learning you, copying you, adjusting itself to fit your shape. And now it's just a matter of time before you're humming too, before your handwriting starts changing, before your reflection starts skipping a beat, before your thoughts start ending in we instead of hi. So I guess that's why I'm writing this down, because every cycle needs a storyteller. And this time, it's me. This time, I get to be the one who leaves the trail of breadcrumbs for the next janitor, the next patient, the next curious visitor who doesn't heed the red line. And maybe this is how the asylum expands, not by walls and wings, but by stories, by planting seeds in the minds of readers, listeners, watchers, letting the infection grow across space and time. And if you've made it this far, if you've read every word, then I've done my part. I've passed the infection. And now the asylum knows your name too. Now it's watching you. Now it's learning you. And I hope, for your sake, that you never dream about a place with red hallways and humming in the vents and reflections that don't blink. Because if you do, you're already inside. And you'll understand, sooner or later, what I've come to accept. I never left Wright Valley Asylum. I never escaped the footsteps or the whispers or the eyes watching from behind the walls. I just became them.